Oh gosh. Hi everyone, welcome to Vox Vomitus, also known as Word Vomit. We are missing our guest right now. She just had a technical issue, but she should hop right back on. But for now, I will just introduce, here she comes.
I guess I pushed the wrong button when I was closing everything out.
That's okay. That happened. So as I was saying, our guest, Mary Burton, is here with us today. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the horror author of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and From Daylight to Madness. I'm joined once again by my Vox Vomitus vixens, Allison Martine, the author of the romance series The Bourbon Books, which includes Dibs and Since September. And we have Trisha Ridinger McKee. She is the author of the Beyond series, including Beyond the Dreams and Beyond the
Surface.
Beyond the Surface. What's so funny is I almost said Beyond the Chaos because you and I were talking about your new book. And I was like, wait, that one's not out yet. So we would like to welcome our guest, best-selling author, Mary Burton. Welcome, Mary. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
So usually we do a cheers right now, and then you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. Cheers.
Okay. I've been writing since I think the first book came out in 2000. And I think it was I just finished, like I'm finishing up right now, my 50th book. So I've been around for a while. I started in historical romance and wrote some of those, and then switched to short romantic suspense, and then switched to suspense. And I've also woven in a women's fiction line in there as well under a different name. So I've just tried a little bit of everything over the years.
Mary, tell us the other name that you publish under for anybody who doesn't know those other names.
It's Mary Ellen Taylor. In fact, I got a copy just in case, but it's Mary Ellen Taylor. And her book just came out in August.
Hers.
Her book.
So we'll get to that later, that personality thing. Okay. We'll get there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you have a different persona? Like when you're Mary Burton, writer of suspense, woman obsessed with police procedurals, do you have like a different personality when you do those interviews when you're Mary Burton versus when you are the other one, when you're Mary Ellen?
Somebody for a book or
doing it like here, because today you're Mary Burton.
Right. Yeah, I guess if I were Mary Ellen Taylor, I'd probably put on a lighter colored shirt.
There is no, I'm with you on that. For a long time, I was convinced when I write romance, I can't have my glasses on, but then I can't see anything.
Now Mary Ellen Taylor, I just put my glasses.
There we go.
It's like Superman and Clark Kent.
Mm-hmm.
We could never tell the difference.
Great disguise.
It works every time.
People are mystified. So 50 books is that seems to me like such an unreal number. It's amazing. How fast do you write?
I'm writing about 3 books a year now. And so I am working, 6.5 days a week. Because it takes time. And so yeah, I'm pretty organized, but I hit the ground running every day. Today, for example, I get up about 4:30. Get up, get the dogs. I have 3 dogs. Get them out and about, work out, and then start the day. So yeah, it's a busy pace, but I like it, so it works out great.
So what were you doing before you became Mary Burton bestselling author?
I was a marketing director for an engineering firm. Believe it or not, we design landfills. And the first baby was coming along, and I thought, I bet you I could try this writing thing. And I joined the Virginia Romance Writers and started going to meetings. And that baby is now 28 years old. And so because it took me about 5 or 6 years to sell the first book. But I've been plugging away in my little office. My living room is my office, because when the kids were little, nobody could get anywhere without me hearing them. And so it's just kind of here, even though they've moved out and moved on. But
but now you have dogs, so
I have dogs, so it's really not that much different. They are very demanding, and they have their schedules, and they do not let me forget when it's time to walk, time to get something to eat.
Yes.
And they're old and they're very opinionated. So they're the boss.
But that might help you take the breaks. I know when I'm writing, I forget to take a break, except my bulldogs are like, hey.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes. I'll have people say, you should get up and move around. I said, I don't need to be reminded of that. I've got little reminders that are good for about an hour and a half, and then they need something.
An hour and a half is an hour and a half. I would kill for an hour and a half.
I know. Uninterrupted. And I write in the mornings when they nap, just like when the kids were little and they nap. It's like I'm still writing around nap times.
Yes.
My kids were the non-napping variety, so I never actually had that.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah, they don't sleep.
Yeah.
That's tough.
But you could give them Benadryl.
Benadryl.
Just saying. So, Mary, can you tell us a little bit? So you mentioned the word that you were very organized, and I know you research a lot. Can you talk about your research process?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things to do as a suspense writer, and I say this in every interview, is to go to the Writers Police Academy. I don't know if you've heard about it, but this past year, and I've gone for 10 years. It's this past year it was in North Carolina, so I could drive to it. I'm in Virginia. I think next year it's going to be Wisconsin. In fact, this year it was virtual, which was fantastic. But you just have all these experts that are brought together, and they speak about their subjects, and it's a good place to ask the creepy questions that sometimes suspense writers have to ask. This current book is about arson, and when you're asking somebody, okay, if I had to set a fire, and they can explain to you the mechanics of it without thinking you're totally crazy.
Exactly. And without the authorities starting to track your browser history and go, we have this string of arsons, and I think Mary Burton's looking kind of like our prime suspect.
When I left last year, and I set in on a couple of arson seminars just because that's how it worked out in my schedule, the book ideas started churning. So when I got back to Richmond, I ordered a bunch of books on arson, and I read a good bit about it because I wanted to not only understand how you do it, but why it's done and what motivates people, because that's where the stories come from, when you can kind of figure out those motivations. Yeah. But yeah, I did quite a bit of research on it last year. And
do you ever get scared? Oh, sorry.
No.
Continue.
No, I probably should, but I don't.
Well, I was gonna say, like, do you ever get scared of your browser history? Like,
I don't even want to know what it says. I don't. It's probably. Yeah. I think the running joke amongst all suspense writers is the FBI will show up one day, because we do have such a crazy browser, and it is what it is. And YouTube is a great resource as well if you want to see an autopsy, or you want to research a location. You want to see like 10 reasons why you should live in Montana, 10 reasons why you shouldn't. So I start kind of, watching a lot of clips to hear people, get a sense of what the area is like, because the setting is kind of a character too.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because I just finished reading one of yours, so I would have a feel for your writing and your style, and it was set, I think, very close to where you live. So I wasn't sure if most of your books are set near you, so you feel like you have that kind of sense of what people are like there and what the setting's like, not just physically, but what the community is like.
Initially, I did set several in the Richmond area, and I was attending the local Citizens Police Academy. That was another resource. And then I was also attending the local FBI Citizens Academy. So I was learning a lot about this jurisdiction and what goes on. So it was a natural fit to go ahead and set the books in this area, because because you start with what you know the best.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, I mean, how many serial killers can come to Central Virginia? So you have to be real. You have to start moving around and kind of mix it up. I set some in Northern Virginia. I've lived up there for 5 years, up in the Alexandria, DC area. I've set some in Nashville. I've been there several times for conferences and visits. I've set several in Texas. I've been down to Texas a few times, again, to research the location. And now this latest series is in Montana. I've not been to Montana because of COVID, but it's on my bucket list. So I've read a lot about it and talked to friends who've lived there and tried to get a sense of it. But yeah, you try to make it as real as possible.
Yeah. So what do you think is it that draws you to write these darker stories, these suspense novels? Because
yeah, that's a good question.
How do you go from that historical romance into we're murdering everybody? Like we just lose the romance along the way here.
When I wrote those historicals, I was always trying to weave in a little mystery, and but I knew I couldn't put but so much in there because that's you have to respect your genre.
Yeah.
So when I was writing the shorter suspenses, I was also trying it. I'd write the contracted pages in the morning, and in the afternoon, I'd try the plot for the bigger, scarier book kind of thing. And that took me about 1.5 years of balancing what I had on contract versus trying to get this new thing going. And it's a puzzle. I think these suspense novels are puzzles. The longer they are, the more complicated they can get, the more points of view you can play with. And and I think people like a little bit of the scary because it's in the pages of the book. It's usually fairly well resolved at the end. There's a sense of justice at the end, which I think people really like. Yeah, it's just you read all kinds of things. I've got a ton of books here about from FBI profilers, forensics, the whole thing. And you read the research books, and the ideas just kind of come alive pretty quickly. But I
so were you always like as a child? Did you like crime TV shows, and were you a weird kid, Mary?
Yeah, I was the kid that would sit around and make stories up in my head because I was always kind of spinning like, well, what if, and not everybody does that. But I used to watch they weren't anything. It was network TV, so they weren't that intense. But I always loved the puzzle. I always loved the mystery. And if there was a little romantic element, I thought that just made it a little bit more interesting. Added another thread. So yeah, I was hooked on mystery a long time ago. So I love it.
So I love reading mysteries. I feel like because I'm not a plotter, I'm a total pantser. I don't think I could write a mystery because I would never know the end. Like I would be one of those terrible mystery writers that just at the end said, oh, I guess the butler did it. Okay. And people would comment and review it and say, you just pulled that out of your butt. So
sometimes you don't know, or you think you've written it in the synopsis, and you get to the end and you feel like, this character feels just too obvious to me as the killer. Who else could it be? And then you start thinking about it, and that's the rewrites. That's there's usually 5 or 6 drafts on a book, and I often do not know who the killer is, or I think I do on the first draft, and it often can change.
I love that.
Yes.
It's whatever surprises me, I think will surprise the reader. So
that's great.
A killer or if a character kind of comes out of left field, and I think that could be the guy. I think, all right, here we go. Let's do some rewrites.
Yeah.
Well, and then you can do that as a pantser. You might not know till the end, but then you have to go back and fix it so you can put those clues in earlier. You may not have put them there the first time, but the reader's not going to know what was in the original draft because we don't let them see that.
Exactly. It's like trying to do it house. You just don't do it. But it's and also I was going to make a point about the rewrite. It just flew out of my head. So ask me a question.
More about the rewrite.
We'll get to the rewrites. Trisha, do you have any questions for Mary before we get to talking about the bad side of writing?
Sure. Well, it is actually a rewrite question. Are there times, instead of at the end, are there times when you're midway through and you're thinking, this just isn't working, and you go back and rewrite from there?
Yeah, that's why I have this book, the Mary Ellen Taylor book. I was writing it last summer, and I was 200 pages into it, and it did not feel right. I felt like there were pieces that were good, but it did not feel like it was flowing like it should. So I tossed the 200 pages and started over. And that did hurt. And I've had to do that.
That hurts me hearing it.
I toss at least 25 to 50 pages on every book, because
Really?
you think you know, and you realize you don't need them, or it's helped you write your way into the story. So you've actually told yourself a bunch of backstory that you don't need to share with the reader. And
That's a good point.
And the point that I was going to make about rewrites and plotting, when you go back to the beginning and you start to do your rewrites, sometimes your subconscious already has figured out the theme, and it's laid little clues there that you didn't notice the first time.
Oh,
so I think you have to trust that your subconscious also has more answers than you do on the first draft, and that the answers will be in that story somewhere as you start to rewrite. If that makes sense.
It does.
That does make sense. Because that I mean, I love, like, it's just so allegorical that, like, you're solving your own mystery in your mystery novel, that you're
cutting out your own puzzle pieces and trying to fit them together. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but it's fun to do that. And when it comes together, there is no better feeling. You know, when you get that, oh, that's how it's supposed to come together, or that paragraph really fell into place. It's a fantastic feeling.
It is.
It's what keeps us going.
Yes. Allison, do you have any questions for Mary?
Well, one thing we kind of talked on just earlier, as far as you writing under these different personas, was there an idea behind not publishing all of them as Mary Burton rather than having different names? And I ask personally because I write romance under Allison Martine, but I also write literary science fiction. That hasn't been published yet. It's out on submission. I don't plan to publish under that same name because it is a different genre, but I wasn't sure how far along into your career you were when you were having a second name. And did you worry that your audience wouldn't find you, or did you know the audiences were going to be different anyway? What was that decision like?
I knew they'd be different from the very beginning. And when you start to write a book under a certain name, you are creating a brand, and that brand is a promise to your readers. So I promise you, when you pick up Mary Burton, it's going to be scary. And I knew if you picked up Mary Ellen Taylor, it would not be scary, and readers would be disappointed. So I created her and started, because it's a different feel. It's more women's fiction. It's got a historical mystery in it, but it's not murder and mayhem. And I promise you, when you pick up a Mary Ellen Taylor, it's going to be a more emotional read, a little bit of history, old homes, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, your name is your brand. So if you're creating a new brand under science fiction, you may want to consider a different name.
Yeah, and I already had planned to, but I know some people had said, oh, well, then people won't find you. And I figure, well, hopefully it won't be that hard to figure out that they're both me, but it is a very different feel. And I would think people would want to know what they're getting with each one.
Exactly.
That they would know, okay, when Allison Martine is on, it's romance. When it's A.M. Hubbard, I'm also trying to hope people might think I'm related to L. Ron Hubbard. I'm not. And pick a science fiction up that's just conveniently shelved nearby.
And you're also gonna find a new audience. You are kind of starting over a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Because I think when you write the different genres, it just juices up your creativity, and it teaches you lessons you can take back to your romance novels. And so things I've learned writing women's fiction, I've put some of that into suspense, and I put more mystery into the women's fiction. So they kind of feed off each other. You're just sharpening your skills as a writer overall.
Well, I know I like bouncing back between them as far as the brain break, because they take different parts of me And if I did one for too long, I would feel like I'd get in a rut. So it's good to mix that up and then go back, kind of hop back and forth. But I can't hop midstream then. So that might be my own brain limitations. I don't know about you. If you finish one, because you were saying earlier, you had contracted pages in the morning and then you're doing something else in the afternoon. Do you still write like that? Or was that when you were just kind of getting going?
In the spring, usually the spring, I'm balancing 2 books. So the suspense, this year, the suspense was due first. So it was priority. So it was the morning pages. And then I would take a break in the middle of the day and then and work on the women's fiction in the afternoon for a couple hours. And it's almost like that pre-writing. You know, all these pages aren't going to survive, but you're getting to know your characters. And so once the suspense went in, I hit the ground running on the, like I took 20 minutes off and jumped into the next book. And
20 whole minutes.
I know. I took maybe an afternoon.
I like it.
And jumped right into the Mary Ellen Taylor. And then when she was done, took about a day and jumped into the next Mary Burton.
Yeah.
Wow.
Due in a couple of weeks.
I love how
gosh. Well,
you can talk about yourself in third person, and it's totally fun.
It's like
When she's doing this, versus when she's doing that.
keep it all straight. They're too.
I know. Do you have to change into a lighter colored blouse when you're Mary Ellen, right? Or do you? Does it require?
Rough. It's just net. It's worn yoga clothes. It works for all genres.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
And flip-flops. Flip-flops. But yeah.
I feel like, especially now that so much of our lives are just inside of our homes or away from people, yeah, it's the common thread amongst all writers now that it's yoga pants. It's the yoga pant thread.
I'm pretty sure we all have a uniform. We just haven't acknowledged it yet. But it's the
Yeah, it's yoga pants. It's a comfy shirt, and then like a cocktail sometimes.
cocktail at the end of the day. Sometimes not at the end of the day.
Breakfast beverage of choice: screwdriver, mimosa, or hibiscus, and go.
So, when you were younger, were you always writing, even before you decided to become a writer?
No, I didn't start writing until I was about 30, because I again always had the stories in my head. But it takes a certain amount of confidence to put the words on the page, because as you know, it's hard when somebody critiques it or comes back at you with comments, and that takes courage to do that. And it took me that long to kind of build up the courage. And then I had to learn the skills to translate those stories into a coherent idea, because it's skills. It's learning setting. It's learning plotting. It's learning character development. And I didn't know all that in the beginning. I had to read books on writing. Dwight Swain's Techniques of a Selling Writer. It's quite thick reading, but it's good. And then I had a critique group, and we met every Friday, and we would exchange chapters and critique each other's work. And I learned a lot from those gals. We haven't met for about, 14, 15 years, but they were invaluable in the beginning.
Are you still in touch with some of them, or just you guys aren't meeting as a group?
We don't meet as a group, and I will see a couple at conferences occasionally, but everybody's moved and scattered, and we're all busy. But yeah, I don't. I miss that. I miss that camaraderie, and I miss not seeing writers at conferences, because there's a lot. It's nice to talk to other people that do what you do.
Yes. Well, this is, one of the reasons why we started this podcast was because, so Alice and Trisha and I all of our first novels kind of came out right around the same time. Mm-hmm. Our second novels came out right around the same time. So we've had this kind of virtual, we call ourselves like book wives or book sisters. Mm-hmm. But a lot of this has happened since the pandemic started. So, our first novels came out and there were no book signings and no things like that. So, this is the way that we get to now chat about our craft with people who are incredibly talented, and we can talk about the mistakes we make along the way. And
Absolutely,
So,
and you're reaching a lot of people that might not be able to get to a conference or can't travel, and so you are. I think that's the good thing that's come out of COVID is, we are able to reach readers in new ways. It's forced us to be more creative,
Yes.
and I think it's all going. I don't think it's going away. I think there are always going to be ways to reach readers like this now.
yeah.
Because there are folks at home that love to hear it.
Yeah, I love that. So I had a question, and now I can't really remember it. It's probably about your dogs. Oh, I just said dogs, and now my dog is barking. Can
Oh
you hear
boy,
that?
Tubby. No.
You can hear mine coming
Okay.
down the street because Buddy knows how to open the back window, and he starts barking out the window when he's about a block from the house. So I know they're coming before they arrive.
Oh,
I sit there and I watch him lower that window every time. It's like, how do you know that?
What
Very
taught you
clear.
this?
Presses
Taught
it with
you
his
this?
paw and barks out the window.
I love that.
oh.
So do you ever go back and reread your earliest work? Like your first few novels? No, look at her. She's like,
No, I don't want to go back. I'm always, what's next? I never go back. Once I hit send on the copy story edits and it's done with the publisher satisfied, I don't go back because I'm thinking about the next one already. It's almost like I've closed the door and I've got the door to the next story.
Well, and it would make you crazy to keep going back to it too, because then you'd be like, oh, but I could have done this differently or that differently. And you know what? Anything differently, put it in the next book and just keep going forward.
My first novel, I would write, I would probably have a bit of critique for it, and I would find things that could have been done better. And I don't want to, I did the very best I could at the time. And it was a great stepping stone for the next story. So, I never look back. I don't listen to my audiobooks. I am full steam ahead.
Now,
do
Mary,
you
you
read
don't
your reviews?
like you're not the narrator, are you? You have someone else do that. Okay.
No, I don't think I have those ladies and gentlemen have such good voices.
Yes.
And my family's always like, what did you say? We can't hear you. So
leave that to their professionals.
Exactly. I'm leaving that to the professionals.
So we have a comment and a question. How do you decide which genre to write in? I know you write more than one. Do you prefer writing one genre over the other? And this is from another author. Her name is Carrie Wood.
Okay, Carrie, thanks. I was trying to read it without my glasses, and it wasn't very successful for reading it.
I know. If I got the words wrong, it's because I'm not wearing my glasses either.
It's like we're all leaning in. It's the stories you're naturally drawn to. I was always drawn to suspense and mystery, so it made sense to try that. And I've always enjoyed a good women's fiction novel, and I like those historical novels. I minored in history in college, so I love history. I love reading history books. And I just had this story that I was coming back. Actually, Mary Ellen was born when I was coming back from a mystery conference in Maryland. It was Malice Domestic, I think. And I was driving back, and I was early, and I didn't have to get the kids off the bus till 3:30. And it was only about 11. So I swung through Old Town Alexandria because I'd always wanted to go to the museum there and the historical museum. And, when you have kids and a husband, nobody wants to stop and look at the historical stuff. So I had about an extra hour and a half. So I swung through, and they had this huge display on the Jameson Bakery that had burned in 1880. But I started reading about it, and I got really fascinated with the history of Old Town Alexandria. And what a pivotal city it was in the 1850s and 60s. And so I started thinking, oh, okay, let's see what I could write about that. And the story just kept coming back to me and bothering me and like tugging me on the shoulder. So I was writing suspense in the morning, and I started playing with the stories in the afternoon. And it just kept coming back and kept coming back. And so I finished the manuscript, shopped it around, and it got rejected. I needed to tweak it. I got some good feedback from the editor, so I tweaked it based on their comments, and then was finally able to sell the first one. I think it was about 10 years ago. Yeah, it's easy for me to balance. Like you said, you feel like you get in a rut if you stay in one too long, and you go to the other one and you feel refreshed when you come back. So they're great. I think they balance each other really well.
When you said you shopped it around, then does that mean that your publisher wasn't just like, give us everything you've got? You still had to go through that process again?
Right. Yeah. My current publisher wanted to do my suspense at the time. They wanted me to focus on my suspense with them, which is fair. And so we shopped it around, and it's like like I said, you're starting over. You're a new name, you're a new book, and you go through the rejection process and the rewriting process, and you learn lessons. And that's exactly what I did. And the rejections never get fun. I can tell you that. I'd written probably 25 books at this point. And I thought, I'm not going to be rejected, but you do. I mean, it happens, and that's okay. That's sharpens you up, makes you try a little bit harder. So, so I learned from that, and went from there.
Well, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know you'd written 25 books already. You were a best-selling author. I think it takes so much courage to like go back and start over with a fresh name. Did you ever almost like rethink your decision and say, oh, maybe I'll just do this under Mary Burton, and they'll recognize the name, and they'll at least know that I can sell books?
Well, it was kind of a business decision too, to create the separate name. Because at the time, and I think it's all changed a lot more with digital publishing and ebooks, but you kind of lived and died by your sales numbers. So if you're new person that you created, or let's say I wrote these first books under Mary Burton and the sales numbers weren't good, it would hurt the Mary Burton brand. So I was going to keep the sales numbers separate between the two. So if one didn't go so well, it wouldn't impact the brand that was doing really well.
No, that's very savvy.
Under the radar to kind of figure this out, which is, and it did. It takes time to figure out a new genre, because they are different. It's not a one size fits all, as you know. Even the word choices in the paragraphs in a romance are going to be different from a suspense, which are going to be shorter, quicker, more direct. The language is different. So, it's learning those nuances as you're switching genres. Does that help?
No, I completely appreciate that. And just that needing that thicker skin, it's still something I'm definitely working on, because you're sitting there and you're getting critiques from books that are already out, and you're getting rejections from books that are coming out. And you're just thinking, when does this just end and I can just focus on writing? And it really never does.
It doesn't.
Never. No, I don't think it.
And they always say, once you've gotten your rejection, that proves you're a real writer. You're
Badge of honor.
You're earning your stripes. But you do. Each letter I would receive, either back in the historical days or trying to write the short suspenses, they got rejected a few times. The suspenses, it took me about a year, those got rejected and finally got picked up. I mean, so every time I switch genres, I've gone through rejections. And I just kind of accept. I think if I ever created a new name, I would just accept that it's probably going to get rejected. But
is there a genre you're still trying that you haven't decided to dip your toe in yet? Are we waiting for a sci-fi or a military drama?
There's physically no time right now, honestly.
But Mary, you can give up sleep. You can give up working out. I mean, there's time. There's time for a Mary Burton horror novel.
I don't know if my hands type that much more.
No.
But if a story that comes to you that's not within your genre, and you think, oh, I'm just going to type up a few words about it, sometimes you're telling yourself something about your current story. You're just doing it in a kind of a non-threatening, fun way. Like, this doesn't really count. Right. This is for fun. I'm just doing some morning pages. But what I've done is I've worked out a character point in the current story, if that makes sense. I used to do that a lot. When I was
it does.
learning.
That does make sense.
I would practice, like pretend. I'm going to pretend to write this time travel. I know I'm never going to sell it, but it's fun to write. It kind of loosens my brain up. And then once I've kind of worked it out of my system, I'm really ready to write the contracted words. I used to call them the morning pages, the kind of get the brain going.
You say that as a teacher, newspaper, the morning pages, and hot off the presses. Here, the morning pages, get them off to the publisher.
Delete, they're awful.
No.
They are.
No.
They'll never be seen. That's the running joke. If anything should happen to me while I've written the first draft, for the love of God, do not send it out.
I hope you've gotten that worked out with your husband.
A lot happens during those rewrites. Not magic.
If I go into a coma during the first draft, under no circumstances are you allowed to publish it. I will wake up and stop you.
Exactly. I will haunt you.
So do you, we're almost running out of time, but so do you delete and never look at things, or do you save kind of the bad in a folder on your computer that is just...
If I have to cut 100 pages because it doesn't work, I am going to put it in a folder because it's 100 pages, and I might be able to find nuggets in there of gold.
Yes.
But no, I write over. I don't save anything. If I start over, I start over. I find that sometimes if you just release the pages that aren't working, just cut them and release them. Exactly.
To the wind.
You'll kind of release what's been holding you back.
Oh, wow.
That kind of, you keep hitting the brick wall and you don't know why. And you let go of those pages that aren't working and suddenly the brick wall goes away.
So the wall was in those pages.
Exactly. And you were trying to fix something that wasn't fixable. And once you accept that you can't, then the other good stuff comes to you.
Nice.
Well, that's, when people are singing, so I went to school for theater a million years ago, and if you're having a hard time hitting a note in a song, it's usually not that note. It's whatever happened right before it that's causing the problem. Yeah. So when you said that, that's what it reminded me of. I'm like, oh, it's the buildup. If there's something in that buildup that's not right.
You've driven down a dark alley and you didn't realize it. So if you can just back out of that alley, delete it, get back on the red. That's how I... But sometimes I like that they just take you down these alleys and you don't want to go, but they're so entertaining.
Yes.
So you follow them and then you have to delete them. But that's okay.
Yeah. As somebody who writes primarily horror, but it's very character-driven horror. It's like gothic horror. Sometimes my characters do things that really upset me. I'm like, you're changing my story. And sometimes I go with it, and sometimes I have to delete and and put them back where they belong. But a lot of times, like, they do something ridiculous and it's good.
Exactly. And I think that's your subconscious. It knows the story and it's throwing these little clues to you. And just roll with it. You can always delete it. You can always just say, no, it didn't work. Or, oh, it did work. It's the second half of the book.
It's what turned a one book thing that I was doing into a 2-book thing, because all of a sudden I had a character do something crazy. And I was like, I'm just going to go with it. And I'm like, oh no, this is a series now.
That's how it's usually a character in a book that I really like, but it isn't their book. And that's where the next comes from. They just demand it. So I have to listen.
The characters.
I'm not in charge.
Well, we are very sadly out of time, Mary. I want to thank you so much for being here, having a cocktail with us. You are awesome. Last cheers.
Cheers to 50 books. I mean, seriously.
Thank you.
Right. They're under multiple personalities too. So cheers to your multiple personalities.
Everybody who's watching this live right now, thank you for being here. If you're catching this on the replay or listening to the audio, thank you as well. Stay tuned next week where we have author Max Seek. This has been Vox Vomitus. We are a copywritten podcast on the Global Authors on the Air Network. I want to thank Roman Siratin, our producer, and Pam Stack, our executive producer, and the entire team at the Global Authors on the Air Network. See you next week.